I'm Jordan Rathkoff, and I live in Brooklyn, New York, with my wife, Anna Rathkoff. Anna was diagnosed about 7 years ago with breast cancer, and at the time of her diagnosis, we had a 3-year-old son. I remember when Anna first felt her lump, it was actually on her birthday, which is crazy. But I could just tell something was bothering her, and I was asked her what was going on, and she told me she felt a weird lump and asked me if I could, check it too. And I felt it, and I don't know, I didn't really think it was cancer, but I didn't like it, and so we knew like it was probably just the best thing to do was go check it out quickly. Um, I was really scared at the first doctor's appointment. My mother, when I was younger, had been diagnosed with cancer, so I was 11 and my mom was 48 when she was diagnosed. So I knew it was very possible that it could be cancer, but I wasn't super worried about it. Ani had a really healthy lifestyle. She had no family history. She wasn't a smoker. Just the kind of traditional things that you're told to look out for weren't her check mark. And the doctor, even when doing the physical examination, felt like actually it didn't feel to her like a traditional cancerous lump. And so I remember I was actually crying from relief a little bit when she had said that. I didn't realize how much tension I had built up inside of me because I was scared, but also trying to project that it was okay. And then, maybe 4 or 5 days later, we kind of had a good feeling that we might be okay. And then we got the results, and it just was unfortunately cancer. And I remember her medical team was also a little bit surprised as well. They told us you never know until you get the biopsy, but we did have a feeling from the team that they weren't overly concerned by anything that they were seeing. And then it was just everything changed. Ani called me. I was at work, so I wasn't really accessible. She couldn't reach me for a while, apparently. By the time I reached her, she was just hysterical. And um, yeah, I just went to meet her as soon as possible. She left her work and we met at my parents' house. And, my mother was there and my father was there. And they had gone through this themselves, 30 years before. So we had some support, but we also felt terrified. I don't know how we explained to a 3-year-old that mom was sick. And it's all kind of a blur. I don't even remember that we ever truly explained it to him, honestly. And looking back, on videos we were taking at the time, I didn't realize exactly how young he truly was. He was basically not even verbal. I mean, he was making noises and some words, but he was a real baby. And so I think that what we tried to do the best we could was normalize it for him. So we made the hair shaving was more about like a fun party where he could help us with shaving mom's hair. And I'm bald, so that helped. It wasn't, it wasn't the first time he saw someone without hair. And uh, I think it got harder as treatment started to go on. She just was less physically, energetically available to him. She was, just exhausted from chemotherapy and then radiation. We were a little bit surprised actually how much more tired she was even from radiation than she had been from chemo. So there was that period of time where Jesse was really kind of in gray waters, so to speak, in that we weren't being explicitly explaining to him cancer, but we were telling him that mommy wasn't feeling well and that she was getting better and we were helping her and that we just, she needed to sleep. And so he had this cute thing when she was really tired, he would come to her bed with like this bottle and like a one of his stuffed animals, and he would just curl up into her and like bring a book. And what's really crazy is that now he's 10 and he still does that when Ani's sick. Like he has this really weird instinctual memory of when mommy's not feeling well, he should curl up with her with a book. And he brings now like a bigger water bottle instead of a baby bottle, and maybe a Star Wars toy instead of a, but he's doing essentially the same thing just intuitively. So it's almost like it's ingrained in him, even if he was too young to truly register what was happening. I don't know that we were doing a great job of keeping that conversation together when it was happening. I think it's something we actually learned. We're both photographers and we were both taking photographs throughout to help process it. And it's really kind of crazy because it was years later when we were looking together at the photos that some of these conversations actually started opening up. But at the time, I think we actually weren't really doing an amazing job of communicating to each other how we were feeling for a variety of reasons. I mean, selfishly for me, or maybe it wasn't selfish, I was really scared she was going to die. And I didn't know how to talk to her about that. I didn't know how to say to her, I'm scared I'll lose you and I don't know what I'll do. And that made me feel more isolated because I felt also some pressure, which surprised me, that I'm supposed to be this like wall of support as the man and the caregiver, and I should be there for her and be strong. And like I felt in a lot of ways much weaker than how I perceived her. I felt like she was actually incredible. I've always felt this about Ani. She's like incredibly strong and incredibly resilient. I've seen her through a variety of difficult things in her life. And she always inspires me. And I felt on the flip side totally weak and like barely keeping it together sometimes. And I was scared to tell her that. And then I found out that she felt that way a lot too. And she was scared to tell me that she actually felt really broken and lost and didn't feel strong at all. She actually felt totally weak and lost all her confidence. So it's kind of interesting. I feel like it's a reason why we like to share our story too, is because I do think we learned a lot together over the period of time, and it wasn't always so evident as it was happening. I can speak for myself that the reason I needed to do it at the time, there were a few reasons, conflicting reasons sometimes. One was I didn't want to be there. I didn't want it to be really happening to us. I didn't want us to it to be our lives. And somehow I felt like with a camera, it was almost like work. Almost like I went into this like lizard brain photojournalistic where like even like these horrible visions of like my wife getting chemotherapy pumped into her body, I could worry more about the angles and how I would show that. Um, it was like a distraction in some ways. And it made me feel like I was living in a movie. This wasn't really happening. At other times, though, it served different purposes. Other times, it actually was the way that I felt like I could hold on to the things I loved the most forever, like because I was really scared of losing Ani. So if I took a really beautiful moment of her with our son, I felt like no matter what happens, we'll always have this. Like I'll never forget this. I'll look at this image and I'll remember exactly how much love I felt for these people. So, I feel like the reasons I was using the camera kind of changed, but I always knew that I was hoping that we could use the images to help others. I just always felt strongly about that I knew how much support we needed and how hard it was for us to find stories that felt real and felt authentic and showed what the experience is really like and not some kind of like scripted or, media extreme version of it. I just knew that this would help us and it started to help others. And that encouraged me to continue going. As for Anna's images, I didn't even know she was taking photos half the time. I mean, we were working together, but I just kind of assumed she was too knocked out from treatment and to really be working very much. And it was actually like maybe a few years later when I found like a folder on a hard drive where I saw how much she was actually documenting. And I was like, it blew my mind. I was like, whoa, what is all this? Like, why are there so many photos of like plants and trees and nature? And, she was explaining that like her grandfather had helped her with gardening as a way to deal with trauma in his own life. And that started to help her. I also just saw like all these pictures of Ani that were like almost the opposite of what I was taking. Like I was taking these like beautiful composed images of this like partner of mine who I wanted to show how amazing she is and how tough she is. And then Anna's images were like really different. They weren't flattering. They weren't particularly heroic or strong. She, a lot of them were just like broken mirrors or completely out of focus or scars, just things that she was taking that I didn't really realize she was doing. Originally, when we started doing it, it was really mostly focused on early detection. I wanted cancer, Ani was young, 37 relatively, for cancer with no real reason to think it, and it scared us. And we had other friends who had gone through it, and it seemed to us like this was increasing anecdotally. And so I really just hoped that like a heartwarming story with a child would actually pull on some heartstrings and make some other people pay a little more attention who might not normally think it could happen to them. especially with women with children. You know, one of the things I remember Ani was told was, you know, you get blocked milk ducts, and that's why a lot of people have, you know, I felt like there was a lot of reasons why people might find something and tell themselves not to worry about it and not get it checked out. So we were hoping that maybe it could help with early detection. We were also hoping it would help men, specifically male caregivers who felt like they couldn't find support for a variety of reasons. I experienced that as a caregiver. I went to like social workers at the hospitals, and there were no support groups for men. I tried finding people in Facebook groups. Ani would ask other wives who were going through treatment if they had a husband who wanted to talk, and almost never anyone would raise their hand. So we hoped it could help in that way. I think that over time, what we've realized is actually there's a bigger way in which it could help, and that's the ongoing challenges of survivorship. You know, I almost even don't like to use the word survivorship because I feel like it's a loaded word, and you know, there's a lot of people in our network who are, you know, pretty advanced stages, and we're mindful of everyone. But you know, I think what we mean from survivorship is maybe just the most technical term, which is I think the medical meaning of survivorship is once you're beyond diagnosis, you've kind of entered some form of survivorship um, until uh, you know. So that was kind of what we wanted to make this about. Now is I think that there's a real mental health problem that's out there in the community of people who feel like they're not getting the physical, the financial, and the emotional support that they fully need um, in their lives. And so we hope that this book can also, and our project can also point some attention to the long-term supportive care needs of the community, and encourage things that will help make uh, those aspects of survivorship more manageable. I think right now where I'm at with where we are as a couple is coming to terms with it's okay to not always be fully okay, that things don't always have to be so black and white, that it's okay to exist in a kind of a middle ground, and that you can feel incredible gratitude for the amazing things you have in your life, and the people you have, but you can at the same time also, you know, be dealing with anger, be dealing with grief. Um, I think that's where I am now, and that's what it kind of means to us now is trying to find a way in the present that feels real. Um, I think that it's hard. I mean, I do think that there's like for us, or for me at least, I've struggled a lot with depression in the last many years since all of this happened. It really has triggered tremendous periods of depression for me, and I I don't know. I didn't expect it. I didn't realize how much I would be impacted down the line, and how much, you know, it might even show up at times in our lives when there was no reason to expect it. You know, we were coming off of one of our strongest professional years. Ani, knock on wood, seemed to be in good health. Some other family members of ours who had been sick were in better health. So we felt like, oh, this is, you know, it feels like, and that's when I got nailed with depression. And, you know, I just realized, oh, I actually don't really feel safe anymore to like look forward to things or to feel like things will be okay. I just kind of got used to feeling like at any moment everything could change. And that I didn't realize how much that impacted me and made me scared to kind of live my life. It's really caught up to him too. You know, he was young when it happened, when she was diagnosed. We had been sharing our photos. The story had been seen other places, and he had come across sometimes some of the work, and so he was aware of it through our own photographs, which is kind of a weird twist. And then, like I'd say, like it's hard to really measure because it's been such a crazy 7 years. You know, Ani got diagnosed 7 years ago. Then she like we were just kind of turning the corner, and then COVID happened, and like he's now getting homeschooled and cut off from kids. And then right as that was easing up, his grandmother who lived with us had a stroke and was diagnosed with cancer. So he kind of went from one tough kind of experience, traumatic event to the next. And so in the recent years, we have seen like a pretty serious issue with his anxiety that developed over time, where, I just feel like he's very much more noticeably anxious than he used to be. And then last year, he started crying to Ani because he was sad that he didn't have a sibling and all of his friends have siblings. And so that kind of forced us to talk about cancer in a much more direct way with him, because he kind of wanted to know why we didn't have another one or why we couldn't, and wanted us to have one. And so that was extremely painful for Ani specifically. I mean, it was painful for all of us, but Ani really strongly grieves still the loss of her ability to have a second biological child. And so that forced us to kind of have some conversations with him that we weren't necessarily expecting to have. And it's been helpful and it's been really wonderful talking to him about it. But I do feel sometimes like I'm not sure if we're doing things the right way. Like I don't know if it was the most responsible thing to make our story with him so public and so available to others. And we do think about that sometimes. He says he's okay with it, but he is still a child, and our job as parents is to try to make him not have like permanent emotional damage. So I still am not always sure that we're doing an amazing job uh, at always talking to him about it the way. So we've started reaching out to professionals. When it was all happening, everything happened so fast. And I really remember my main concern was we have to make sure we do everything we can to try to keep her healthy. And so I was disappointed that we might not be able to have a second biological child, but I really didn't care that much because I wanted her to be here and I wanted our son to have her as well. And like, I think at the time I felt like we would be able to adopt or have foster care. So I also felt like there were options available to us beyond biological. I think what we learned, because we did look into adoption and foster care for many years, we didn't expect actually how challenging and difficult that could be for a variety of reasons, financially, but also just practically. There were differences between domestic adoption, international adoption. There were a lot of regulation. There was just a lot to figure out that we did not at all anticipate when we were making that decision. And that's when I think it became a little harder on both of us, is this realization like, oh, we might have like actually kind of really shut the door on on a second child when we opted not to preserve fertility. Um, and that put strain on our relationship for sure. We were in different places. Like she had more of a biological kind of just a very deep need or desire for having another biological child, and I was just in a different. For me, it was more abstract, or it was more rationally thought through rather than like some kind of biological push. I felt that we needed a child. So we were in different places. And I think that I wasn't always as sensitive as I could have been to how hard it was for her. And part of me felt like, we have a kid, you're healthy. Why are you still so upset? Like, we should be grateful for what we have. Right. Um, and then she wasn't there. Like emotionally, that's not where she was. She was actually feeling like she had something very, very significant taken from her against her, in some degree against her will. I guess we made choices, but cancer kind of chose her, and it made it hard for us at periods of time to really navigate that. And I didn't realize how much she was blaming herself, like, for it. I just kind of, I don't know. I should have been more sensitive. I think in retrospect, I wish I had been a little bit more. But I think her work and seeing her photos and some of her writing actually really did tremendously help me understand better what she was going through, which is another reason I just keep coming back to it. The power, I think, of like visual media. It can make us understand things on a very deep emotional level that are sometimes um, differently understood through text or through spoken word. I think the only thing that we've learned for ourselves is that it's a process, and it still is a process, and we're still learning all the time about how to navigate. And all it could take is one bad test result, right? Like all it could take is one. That's the thing. It's like that's what's so crazy about all this is like sometimes I feel like, oh, we've grown so much or we've changed, and then like maybe I find a lump somewhere on my body and like it's just crazy. It's like instantly I'm just transformed right back to where I was 7 years ago, just this like place of like total fear. And that's I think what's been really surprising to me, and I think to Ani as well, is just how primal that fear can be and how it really doesn't take much to get back, no matter how hard you've worked on yourself and exercised or whatever you're doing to be healthy, you can sometimes still just have really bad luck. This is how crazy and how hypocritical sometimes we all can be, or I can be at least. As I'm talking about early detection, as I'm talking about know your body, I didn't go to like a GP for almost 5 years. I just went for the first time like early this year because I was so absolutely terrified that they would find something. I mean, this is crazy. Even when I say it out loud, I was truly paralyzed by fear. Like I just did not want to go find out. Like it's so crazy. And then like I forced myself some. I don't even remember what it was. I just said enough's enough. Like we have a book coming out. I can't like be talking about like being responsible in early detection and then like avoiding my own doctor for like 6 years. And like um, I just felt such a relief after I went. It was I realized how much it's a mental game too. Like how much I built up in my mind these fears from lived experience. And they actually impacted my decision making in a very, I consider, unhealthy way. Like, you should 100% be going to doctors because if something's wrong, you want to know. And yet, even while I like talk about this all the time in my own life, that my dirty little secret is I was absolutely terrified and like not going to doctor appointments. My message for caregivers would be not to forget to take care of yourself, or it's not even forget, it's like don't deprioritize yourself so much that you stop taking care of yourself. I feel like that's more along the lines of what I did. Like I was so hyper focused on what I thought my responsibilities were to Anna, and to our son, and then later on to other people in our family, that I felt guilty almost that I needed help, and I felt ashamed, and that made it much harder on me because I felt more isolated and my mental and physical health got worse, which made it harder for me to be available to do the things that I wanted to do for others. So that would be one suggestion to caregivers is like, I understand why you could sometimes feel like you're not important, but you are.